Hello everyone, welcome to part one of Physical Disability Australia's Relationships webinar around dynamics with family, friends and support workers. My name is Melanie Hawkes and I am the WA Associate Director of Physical Disability Australia, or PDA as it's known. It is wonderful to have you join us for this interesting and informative event. On behalf of PDA, I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands in which we all dwell, and to pay our respects to elders past and present. PDA also acknowledge people with disability, past and present, who are living full and complete lives, and those who have needs that are not yet being met. We ask you to reflect on this and to work with us to bring about the changes that will give all people with disability an opportunity to live their best life. I also extend a warm welcome to any people with disabilities or Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people watching today. Tonight is part one of our two-part relationship series. Tomorrow's webinar will explore intimate relationships, along with the importance of self-love and learning to treat yourself with kindness and respect in order to ensure personal growth, well-being, and not settling for second best. We encourage you to join us for part two tomorrow night. For more information, please see our posts on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, or our recent member email. You can also email promotion@pda.org.au. Because the subject includes adult content, tomorrow's webinar is intended for viewers over 18 years of age, and all participants must confirm this on registering. In tonight's webinar, I'll be joined by Robert Wise, PDA's Victoria Associate Director, Sarah Stiles, PDA's Queensland Associate Director, and her son, Oscar Stiles. Together, we will discuss the stresses, struggles, and interactions that can affect the dynamics of our relationships with family, friends, carers, and support workers. We will share personal stories about what did and didn't work for those for us in resolving these issues and concerns. At the end of tonight's webinar, we'll be opening up a Q&A session and invite you to share your questions. As all attendees have had their audio muted, please direct any questions to us via the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. We will try to answer as many questions as possible, but please understand that the information and advice provided is based on personal experience and may not be applicable in all cases. If you believe that you need personal advice, please seek professional help. If you find yourself overwhelmed by issues raised in tonight's webinar and need help and support, it is important that you take steps to reach out. Whether this means speaking with a friend, family member, GP or colleague, or getting in contact with a counselling service, it is important that you do this as soon as possible. Support can be provided by calling Lifeline on 131114, Beyond Blue on 1300 224636, or Headspace on 1800 650 890. Please know that you are not alone. We hope that you find our presentation helpful, informative, interesting, and hopefully entertaining. Well, that gets the introductions out the way. I'd like to introduce myself as Melanie. As I said, I have a physical disability. I've been a wheelchair user since I was 3 years old. And I live in Perth, Western Australia, with my retired assistance dog, Upton. I haven't always lived alone. When I was a child, my mum and dad did all of my personal care for me. And it wasn't until I was 19 that I got a scholarship to go to Japan and spent a whole year in Japan studying Japanese language. It was my first time using other people to do all my personal care, and I did with showering and dressing and getting in and out of my wheelchair and into bed and all those sorts of things. So while I was living at home, my mum and dad did all of that for me. I grew up with 3 younger brothers. The youngest is 13 years younger than me. So when I was 19 and I moved to Japan for a year, he was only 6. And it was a bit of a struggle sometimes at home to get my mum and dad to do things for me because they were busy with my younger brothers, especially when they were babies. They demanded a lot of time, of course. So I had to learn to do things on my own and do as much as I could as often as I could. But my mum and dad did all my practical support when they weren't busy with my brothers. So when I moved to Japan, mum and dad didn't really want me back at home and have to do all my care again. They got used to me not being at home and have all their free time again to not have to do things for me. And so my parents moved me out to a house, a private rental 3 doors down from their house. And it was really great having a different relationship with my parents. Back then I didn't have any funding. The NDIS wasn't a thing back then. So they still had to come down and do all the practical stuff until I got enough funding and support workers in. So over the years, our relationship has changed from them doing everything for me to doing some things for me to doing some practical stuff like maybe gardening or cooking or shopping my mum always did for me, to just being my parents now. And both of them have retired and they're traveling around Australia. And it's really great that I don't rely on them as much as I used to. So yeah, they're just great supporters now, and as a parent should.
Sorry about the disruption. It looks as though we have a glitch with Melanie in WA. So perhaps we can move on in the interim to Sarah, and she can tell us her story, and then we'll come back to Melanie. Thank you, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Yes, I'm Sarah, Queensland Director for PDA. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, chronic illnesses, scoliosis and hearing loss and vision issues. I do apologise, my son is not feeling well tonight. It's disappointing. He had so much to say on this topic, which didn't surprise me. So I'm going to talk about, first, having a parent with a disability, growing up with a disability, parenting with a disability, and parenting a disabled child. It was interesting growing up because I was born in the 70s. There was no information back then. My mother, everything we have is genetic. And so with no knowledge or information, that created trauma and issues all on its own. Doctors knew nothing. When my mother did try and get some help, they just do nothing, or they can actually make things worse, as they did for me. So because mum didn't have a diagnosis, yet she wasn't visibly terribly disabled, people expected way too much of her, and they also accused her of all kinds of things, judging her. So I do remember her making comments such as, I wish I had something people understood like cancer, because then they wouldn't expect so much from me and they wouldn't judge me, and I could just have the energy to take care of myself and do what I need to do for me and my family. I remember her saying to us girls, look, I'm not like other mothers. I get worse every day. Do not expect me to be like other mothers. I remember going through a period of resenting that. I just wanted my mum. And so, that impacted our relationship, that resentment, even though it wasn't directed toward her personally, because I knew she was giving her best. Any resentment is definitely going to impact a relationship. She also noticed some issues with me. She said to me that she noticed I didn't have the same stamina as my peers, that I never had the same stamina. I tried to tell her things that I was experiencing with my body, but again, because it wasn't visible, she just sort of looked at me and didn't know what to say, and just said the first thing that came to her mouth. Again, doctors knew absolutely nothing. So I just learned to deal with my body on my own, how to prevent passing out on my own, how to prevent getting injuries on my own. Without the knowledge that we needed of disabilities and how to manage them, it was also easy to get depressed because of the high expectations and all the judgments. And also, you know, like, we just want to be there for each other as family as well. I felt like a terrible daughter. I felt like a terrible big sister. And so what would happen then is mum would be experiencing something really tough. And then I would see that, and then that would trigger me. And then me being triggered her, and it was just this vicious cycle. The wonderful thing, though, I guess, in our relationship was we quietly acknowledged that. It was never spoken, but it was quietly acknowledged. It was spoken of later when I grew up, which was wonderful to talk about then. I know that mum worried that we would prefer dad over her because he had health. But she was so much more than her disability, and we could see that. Whereas our father wasn't really interested in relationships. That's clearly was all that mum cared about. So despite the challenges and the traumas that came with our disabilities and health issues and no support, we did recognise that. I know she went to bed feeling guilty every night because of how we were impacted. So then, of course, I grew up and had a child of my own. And it wasn't just, you know, then I experienced resentment in a very different way. I went through a period of resenting my son because he couldn't do for me what I needed, what I wanted. And in fact, so much was expected of me now as a parent. So I did recognize it immediately and I did something about it, but I did notice that that had started to happen. And then, of course, my son, like me, went through a period of resenting my health. I couldn't run around the yard and kick ball with him. I was a single mum. And it broke my heart seeing how much that impacted him. So another way that it impacted him was I felt terrible for my boy as a mum, you know. Him being all alone, him being homeschooled because no school was working for him. And so having no friends, no siblings, no cousins for a long time, they're way younger than him. He was completely all alone. And so I tried to find groups for him to join and things like that to give him something. That actually pushed him away from me because I figured out later it was because he was grieving a life he couldn't have, and that just made it worse. So actually my mother had to point out to me, Sarah, stop, just stop. So what we did then was I focused on having as much fun together as we possibly could to have that fun outweigh all of the, you know, the things that weren't so pleasant. And that was working. It really did help. An example was we got on a bus that went to the opposite side of town that we didn't live on. And we just to see what the other side of town looked like. We saw a park, we got off, we played. An hour later, hopped on the bus, went home. Made a bathtub train so that we could go on imaginary adventures. And so I tried to balance it out the best I could. And while I couldn't do any physical activity with him, our back room was covered in Lego, and we went to all these magic worlds with Lego. Another thing that impacted my relationship with my mother when I was growing up was I didn't want to burden her. I knew that she had her own problems. And so I didn't want to burden her with mine. So I kept it to myself. Now, obviously that made me worse off, my mental health and everything worse off. I became a nervous wreck. But it also meant that she couldn't support me, and she didn't know what was happening with me. And as any parent knows, that just it doesn't work. So that took a great toll, actually, and it took many, many years, well into my adulthood, for me to really understand that, and, you know, to find my voice, actually, and my identity. So I guess there's a lot of guilt and sadness, feeling hopeless, feeling helpless that we had, you know, not getting the mother that I deserved and the mother she could have been if she was able-bodied and healthy, same as my son. But you know what? we still were fortunate enough to give our best, and for our, for me as a kid to recognize that, for my son to recognize that. It's been hard to acknowledge and sort of accept that my parents still support me, but we're at a point now where, like Melanie was saying, it's nowhere near as much. My mother only lives 1 kilometre up the road, so she's nice and close, and my father lives in a tiny house in my backyard because he's not doing so great in his old age. So while there were a lot of negative consequences that prevented us from enjoying a relationship with ourselves and with each other and affected our mental health, there were a lot of benefits as well. So growing up with disability in the family forced us to learn things really early that I think, can take a number of years in adulthood to gain. So we're comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's really a really good thing, necessary for success and happiness. When we don't live in fear of differences in other people, again, that's a really good thing. We find joy in the small things. We see people in for who they really are, and see the bigger picture. We've learned to forgive. We've definitely had to learn how to forgive ourselves and forgive each other. We see the bigger picture. We've learned to accept help and how to give help. So it's very difficult for every human being, I think, to accept help willingly. So I'm very grateful for that lesson. We've learned to sacrifice and acknowledge the sacrifice in others without feeling guilty. We will always be able to work through the tough stuff, okay? Because the tough times in relationships, we have had to work through those, and now we can work through any tough stuff in life. That's a strength that feels like a superpower. We have a realistic definition of success, a big blessing, not a definition that society's put on us. We become courageous. I've had to be courageous from young. We've learned to see outside the box, and we've learned empathy. So I feel like I'm forgetting something, but I think the things that have really helped us is knowledge. Knowledge is a big thing now, because we understand ourselves and we understand each other. We don't take anything personally, so we don't get upset. If pushed through my limits, pushed way past my limits, and my mum is, and then there is a vent, nobody takes it personally. I find that is a massive, massive lesson to learn, that everybody needs to learn. I think that a lot of arguments and issues happen when people take things personally. We've learned from living with disability in the whole family, because there's more family members with it, that not to take anything personally. It's not about us. So now we don't get upset, and that makes it much easier to work through things. Obviously, it took us many years and hard work to get to this point in our relationships, but I would like to say it's definitely worth it. If you have family members that obviously you will never be able to see eye to eye with, I'm not talking about them, but with everybody else, it's definitely worth it. I'm handing back to Melanie now.
I'm sorry, my computer crashed. Thank you so much for jumping in. I am back. So I was speaking about, my parents and how our relationships change. And I think it's a bit funny now that I've got 3 brothers without disabilities. But my parents do probably more for them than they do for me now. One of my brothers has just put an extension on their house, and my dad was over there every day helping with the flooring and the painting. And another one lives on a property, so he's always needing help on the farm with the animals or the house. And I think it's pretty nice now that I'm more independent than my brothers and not relying on my parents as much as I was. And I'm very grateful for everything that my parents and my family have done. One kind of funny thing that happened, I remembered, was for a while my oldest brother and I lived together in that private rental when I first came back from Japan. And when I got the agency, and whenever they didn't send someone, like someone was sick one morning or whatever, my brother would get on the phone and call them and say, my sister can't get out of bed, where are you sending one? hurry up and send someone. She can't spend all day in bed. And it just goes to show that no matter what predicament I'm in, I think my brothers would, not hesitate to come over and be my strongest allies. So I'm really grateful for that. No matter what trouble I'm in, I know they would always stick up for me and help me out. And I have 2 wonderful grandparents as well. My dad's parents are still alive, and they're 95 and almost 100. And it's really great, and a special relationship that I have with them now in their nursing home. And they just celebrated their 75th wedding anniversary. So we had a really nice, lunch and celebrations with them. So I really like that, that you make the best of your relationships that you have now. And every relationship is special, but especially when they're at that age. So moving on to the support workers that I can talk about. And I now self-manage my NDIS funds myself, and I use a mixture of private workers and agency workers. And I find I have a different relationship with the agency workers than I do my private workers. And it could be for a couple of reasons. One is the agency workers are only here for a very short time. So they do my morning and lunchtime services. And there's just so many things to get done in that short time that they're here. So we don't really get to know each other, that we don't spend a lot of time together. And they're always so busy doing things for me. And the private workers have a lot more flexibility. So they're in the evening, they help me do my dinner, they help me go out if I want to go out. And I find there's a lot more flexibility in what we do and how we enjoy our time together. But one thing you have to remember is that my home is their workplace. So I want my house to be a certain way, but I have to respect that that's their work as well. And it has to be respectful, and they want to enjoy their time at work. So as I said, there's more flexibility, open to more different duties. Like yesterday, I had someone color my hair. I often have my nails cut or paint my nails, and there's a lot more flexibility in doing things with the private workers. I also work towards their strengths. So if I know someone isn't very good at something, I won't make her do it every time, perhaps, unless it's an absolute necessary every shift. And you have to kind of get to know the people that you work with, because you are spending some time and they're doing some really personal things with you. So I like to choose people that are fun to hang out with. A lot of them are around my age, some a bit older, some a bit younger. I have a very young one. I'm old enough to be her mum. She's not even 20 yet. Next month she'll turn 20. So we have a bit of a joke, and anytime an old song comes up, she has no idea, and we get a bit of a laugh out of that. But there's a bit of a fine line between the workers who've become friends and friends that you might want to ask to work. So I think it's really important that you set boundaries. Like I buy my workers birthday gifts and kind of expect something in return on my birthday, but you wouldn't necessarily go and share a bed if you're on a holiday together. You want to respect that boundary. You have separate single beds, or I wouldn't share a drink with them, perhaps, unless they got their own straw or tipped it into a cup. Whereas in family, you might be more willing to do that. It's also important to remember that I'm still the boss. So it can be a bit off balance that way kind of thing. But I'm still the employer and they're my employee. But I also want them to have a great time while they're at work. I expect them to be professional, be reliable, trust them. But it's also, they're not here to, well, they are here to care for me, but they don't have to be my carer, if you know what I mean. I still make my decisions. If I want an extra drink, that's my problem, not theirs. But it's also my job to keep them safe. So if I see them standing on a chair, perhaps, it's my job that I have to keep them safe. And use a step ladder if they need to reach something, for example. There's sometimes some difficult conversations that you have to have with your workers if they're not doing what you need to do, or if they're not pulling the weight that you want them to. And it can be quite difficult to confront them. But I think if you're in a situation like that, then you're better off having those conversations. And if you've done something to upset someone, then I prefer to be told to my face, you know, how can I make it better? How is that relationship going to be repaired, if not, or to let them go and find someone else to fill that shift, perhaps. I have a great friend who I met at the dog park years ago, who's a very good cook, and sometimes she comes and makes lunch for a friend and another neighbour of mine. And there's times that I think, oh, should I just employ this friend? She's a great cook. She'd be great on my team. But I also think that it would ruin our friendship a bit if I, you know, if I did ask for that. So it's about a balance, keeping friends as friends or keeping workers, you know, who become friends. So it's all about weighing that up. But it's also nice if someone leaves, like they get a full-time job and they can't fill the shifts anymore, that you can stay friends with them or, you know, catch up for coffee every now and then. It's really nice to keep in touch with them. I think I've forgotten something, but as I kind of said, it's great to have good communication skills and always keep those channels open and and tell people if they're not doing the right thing, and also you want that feedback. Sometimes it might be good to have proper formal you know, catch-up sessions like appraisals and things, but I don't really do that. I like to see someone come in with a smile on their face and leave with a smile on their face and know that they've had a good shift, and I know that I've had a good service. So that's my kind of way. And I think now I hand over to Robert. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. And thank you, Sarah, for stepping in when Melanie had technical issues. Well, I suppose you know me by now. My name is Robert Wise, and I'm the Victorian Associate Director of Physical Disability Australia, and I'm an amputee known as a hip disarticulation. I come to you tonight from beautiful Bayside, Melbourne. Tonight, I'm sharing with you my personal experience on my friendships prior to my disability and now. I acquired my disability as an adult almost 20 years ago, and therefore had a job, friendships, and was ready to enter a relationship. As I am single and do not have my own family, it was not being easy for me adapting to my new chapter in my life. I only had a small number of friends who I met through work and other activities I was doing at the time. As my disability began slowly, my friends were not aware of what I was going through, and I did not share it with them, as I thought they would not be there in the end. Maybe that was a mistake or not. Well, I'll never know now. As I was in hospital, I did have visitors from a couple of my friends and work colleagues, as the hospital that I was in was close to where I worked, and they called in to see me after work. As that progressed on, I had the amputation and still went on, and I was moved into rehab. And my work colleagues stopped coming, and so did a couple of my close friends. I had started going out with a girl prior to my disability. The whole time I was in hospital and rehab, she never came to me or visit me or contact me. I did try once or twice to contact her, but still nothing. And she has since moved on. It would have been nice to have someone to talk to during all the rehab and chemo other than social workers and counsellors at the hospitals. And of course, my mother and father. During all my recovery time, my mother and father were always there to help me and take me to all my appointments and my chemo treatment. And they even helped me set me up in my home, something which I can call my own. Without their help, I would not be where I am today. I do have a brother and sister who both lived interstate, and I get the feeling that they have no time for me as much to say when we do talk or catch up. I suppose system-wise, it's hard for their work and their families, or I feel they have nothing in common with me, as they live active lives and do things I cannot. I also have a younger brother who lives in Melbourne that is almost 1 hour travel time to get to his place, another hour to get back, even longer if I use public transport. The only time I get to catch up with him is when he's coming down to bring his children to visit our mum. I feel, which she only lives down the road from me, which is really helpful for me. And I think when circumstances change, you might start coming less because you have no reason to come down. So I'll probably now have to go there, which is hard for me. He does ask me when we do catch up what I've been doing, but it seems not listening a great deal when I talk to him about what I do and why I do it and my loneliness. But after all the rehab finished and I was adjusted to my life back home, I did see a couple of my friends who did continue to visit me, and we still went out sometimes. But I felt it was not the same anymore as it was prior to my disability. And they seemed to look uncomfortable around me, even at times when I tried to wear my prosthetic to try and look normal, because I choose not to wear a prosthetic because it restricts my movement too much. I prefer the wheelchair and the crutches. And they see me as not normal, and I could not keep up with them while walking around, and I never seemed to want to take the wheelchair in their cars. Eventually, they stopped seeing me, and they excused it was too far to come to see you. And even when I suggested I go and meet them, they will back out and cancel. This was upsetting for me, and I began to feel lonely and not wanted, and I felt like I could never fit back into mainstream life again. I sat at home and binge watched series on DVD because there was no Netflix and streaming services at the time. And I also played video games just to pass the time. I could not keep going on this, and I came to the conclusion, if these friends cannot accept me for who I am, then they're not worth it. It's time to come to try and make some new friends, which I found very hard being disabled and with mobility impairment. And I was getting older, and doing some regular outings and activities for me were now getting difficult, even through age and the disability. I just kept pushing on and joined my local men's shed, as the men's shed program is set up for men who feel isolated, depressed, and forced to leave their jobs early or have some medical reason or disability. So that's why they cannot work. I've gained a great deal from going every week, and it gets me out of the home, and I talk to the other men who some have a disability and some are getting older and can't work anymore. We do have a laugh and joke about the things we cannot do anymore and the things we used to do in the past and why we can't do them now. But they are not close friends, and I feel it has helped me through some hard times. And now with the help of the NDIS, I have support workers 3 times a week, and they have been great in chatting to, listening, and etc. I've been lucky with my support workers. They seem to understand me and my needs. And at one stage, I did have a support worker who I found hard to relate to and not a great help to me as much to talk about as the others. Even it was very hard to chat with him, and I felt very uneasy about being around him, and I could not go on. So I changed out this support worker. That's a good thing about the NDIS. You can choose your support workers and agencies if you. So I corrected this, and now the support workers are no longer an issue. I'm going out in the community more and meeting people and not being stuck at home. I also have joined an NDIS funded activities group, which I go on outings, even they are people with all types of disabilities. I don't feel isolated and uncomfortable around them. The support workers and hosts of these trips are excellent. And the others who go on these trips are a mixture. Some like to talk and some do not. But those who do are easy to talk to and even have a laugh, which I enjoy, and I like to share stories with people I get on well with. I also like to mention I still have one loyal friend who always finds the time outside his family and work to have a chat and even catch up for a drink or a meal out. In fact, he was the first one outside my family to come around and visit me when I got back home from hospital and rehab. Since he knew me before my disability and he knew what I could do, he knows now what I cannot do and helps me out when he can. Sometimes it slips his mind, and I have to remind him, and he apologizes and we move on. He even asked me at one stage to accompany him on a drive back to Melbourne after his working contract finished in Canberra, and he needed some company to drive back. So he thought we'll make a 2-day road trip of it. If I can find my way to the airport, he said he'll drive me home, all expenses paid type thing. So I did have a friend who I don't see much. He helped get me to the airport, which I do appreciate, even when we don't see each other. Maybe it's a great deal, as distance-wise between him and myself is also an issue. On our drive back, I did really enjoy the time together in the car, and it was the first short break after my amputation, and this will be another experience to share at a later date. I consider him a great friend, as with his busy schedule, it may not be a regular catch up or a chat, but he still finds time. And since then, we have done another road trip after one of the COVID lockdowns, which is great for me. At least he still even sees me as a person. I always have been, and it's not my mind that has changed, it's just my body. I like to mention also that PDA, the organizer, is an organisation of people with many different types of physical disability and continues to be a great influence on my life. And their friendships, even though I have not met any of them in person, we have only talked online, and I feel I know them quite well. I found PDA, and they hold online social hours once a month, and one is a general social hour for all PDA members, and another one is known as the Youth Hangout for people the age up to 30s. These are fun and worth joining if you're feeling lonely, and joining PDA is free. On that note, I'd like to finish up and thank you all for your time tonight. The panel is now open to answer your questions.
Thank you, Robert. And there is a question from Andrew. To me, says Melanie, you mentioned friend-worker balance. Did you learn this somewhere, or are you just good at it? I guess it comes with experience, Andrew. And each one would be, you'd consider on its merit each time, I guess. You know, you might have a friend who's out of work, who's doing it tough, and you can offer them some shifts, then you would. Whereas, you know, on a different circumstance, it might be not appropriate to employ them. Or you employ someone, you get on with them really well, and they want to take you out for a meal for your birthday or something, then you would do that as a friend, if that makes sense. So each person you would take individually and consider it that way. I hope that answers your question, but sometimes it kind of comes back to bite you in the bum, because I've had one particular support worker who wasn't very good at her job, and we parted ways, but she still considers me as a friend and wants to catch up quite often. And it's a bit awkward for me now to not want to do that all the time. So yeah, she's a great person. But yeah, sometimes I have to say, sorry, no, I'm busy, or something like that.
All right, cool. We have another question. So Andrew's asking me where my happy place is because of the tough times that my family have had. I would say that my family's my happy place. Coming from all of our struggles, because there were other traumas involved, not just physical disability. That brought enough traumas of dealing with medical, professionals and other things. But there were others as well. So it's wonderful to be able to say my happy place is my family. Nature, big one. I've divided my backyard up into 3 sections with the help of my beautiful mother. I have a mulch area with bushes, trees. That's sort of where I like to sit in amongst all of the plants, just to have when I need to recenter myself and have more of a spiritual moment. We've got the lawn where we play together. My nieces and nephews come over weekly and stuff. And then there's an area of river stones with some succulents, bottle brush, and that I like to go there to read, to exercise, do a bit of work. So each area sort of gives me something different. And because I'm at home most of the time and I'm unable to travel and, go out to work and do those things, working from home, it's definitely been a massive boost to my mental health to have that design in the backyard. And I like it because when my family visit, we can sit out there amongst the plants and just enjoy the breeze and the beauty of the flowers and everything together, and instead of just, being stuck in the house all of the time. And music. So I'll sit at the piano and just play to relax, to get a clear mind, to express any emotions that are just on overdrive. So yeah, that's great too. All right, let's see, do we have another question? We have a question here. How do you find acceptance? So accepting everything in life can be tricky. I know my son was just born with the unnatural ability to accept everything. Yep, good on him. I personally really struggled with that my whole life. And so it was a matter of taking the time to explore what I truly wanted and not just what it seems that I want. Because if that makes sense, to really take time just to explore what I truly wanted and needed, and then be willing to acknowledge that it would be best if I put a lot of that aside and just focus on what I can have. And once I did that, I had a lot of peace of mind, a lot of peace, and then a wonderful life came after that. We have another question. Oops, wrong button. Robert.
It looks like it's directed at me. Yes.
Sorry,
You
can
were-
I just jump in there, Sarah? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I think acceptance is just focusing on what you can do and
Yeah.
not what you can't as well.
Melanie, I finally learned that. It took me 20 years, but I finally learned that.
Yeah, that's
Spot
what
on.
I'm very grateful for my parents to do that, you know, just get other people to do what you can't do and just do what you can yourself.
Yeah,
A great way of
There's a lot of-
accepting life.
a lot of peace in that, and that's when life really happens for you. And yeah, for everybody. Robert, your question. You have been on a massive journey. Thank you for sharing it. You spoke of the sense of community you get from PDA. Can you expand on that and why?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. I found when I joined PDA that I was not alone anymore, because there's other people, there's always someone worse off than yourself. And that's how I came to accept what I was going through. And with PDA, they've been really helpful because they are geared for and I'm one for a person who likes to feel more inclusion of people with a physical disability, to be out there more regardless of what we can or can't do. And PDA has helped me along that journey, because I know what a lot of you all do, especially sharing, Sarah and Melanie are sharing their stories and how they adapted and what they do in life. So it's been a really great journey, and I thought I was really isolated, as I mentioned, and then I didn't know that I tried looking for help everywhere else, you know, and finding join, because I felt like being around normal people was very difficult, because they do very active things and I couldn't do the things they do, like, you know, like going on driving go-karts or whatever they liked doing, and I felt left out and left behind. So I thought, well, I don't want to mix with those sort of people. So I thought, like, maybe I should make friends with people with a physical disability, or even someone with mental disabilities. At least I can relate to them in the same way as I see myself. I hope that's answered your question.
That was a good answer, I think.
Mm.
I'm not
I think
making-
it really helps, yeah, to have that empathy with people, similar situations. And
Yeah,
I would say
that's
you
what's
gotta
helped
find,
me. Yeah.
you gotta find your tribe.
No,
Yeah, people who just get it. You don't have to explain yourself or your limitations or your
because I see you as you are, because they're no.
yeah. And you can learn from each other really well.
Yeah.
And it's you expend less energy just by being around people who you know can't possibly understand, not their fault, but they simply can't. That uses a lot of energy. I find energy I just simply don't have to spend. We have another question. Have any of you ever had to fire a support worker, and how did you do it? Yes.
I done it, yeah. I just mentioned that tonight too. I didn't actually fire, just contacted the agency. I didn't require them anymore. I said, oh, my family member's going to help me on that shift, so I'll contact you when I need you again. That's it. I left it there.
That's an easy way around it.
Yeah, it was, yeah. I didn't
I
offend
have-
anybody.
Oh, look, yeah, yeah, I've definitely done that one, but I've had a few situations, and I had one situation where this woman was coming in to cook for me. She used to be a professional chef. Not only am I disabled, but I'm also autistic. Now you think about what a chef is like in their kitchen, and then you bring them into an autistic person's home, their environment where they're safe. It did not work very well. And she did something really ridiculous in my kitchen, which can be dangerous. For somebody with a disability, everything is placed strategically to prevent injury. And one problem I've had is just people putting stuff wherever, and it just really gets to me. And so, yeah, she did all of this on purpose, and then told the some service provider that there'd been an issue, and there really hadn't. It was a little thing that was easily talked about. Yeah, and she wasn't coming back. And to talk to me, I said to him, she did something really strange. I can't remember exactly what she did. It was something involving just putting stuff wherever. And it was really, really odd and unusual, though, at the extent that she went to. And I said to him, look, quite frankly, having a professional chef with somebody who's autistic was never going to work. And I explained to him why. He said he was grateful to learn that now. And then I spoke to somebody who has been a chef in the past, and she explained to me that's a done practice, that they will deliberately do something wrong so that they can leave the business without there being a big problem, which was interesting. But mainly it is just saying, I don't require your services anymore. I told one lady that my needs have changed. She burned my food, burned my utensils, a few other things. She freaked out and cried. I felt for her, but at the same time, I wasn't coping, physically, because I'd been deserted and I couldn't be moved from the spot that I was in. And it was this big, massive thing that happened. We were, out in public at this big event, and she wasn't there with me where I needed her. And turns out she was off and something had happened, and she was standing there crying. And I just thought, I think she's better off with somebody who's not gallivanting around the country working. And so I just said to her, my needs had changed. Yeah. Melanie?
Yeah, usually for me, it's been mutual. Like I had someone who's like, why are you always telling me how wrong I do things? And it's like, well, do something right and I'll praise you. Kind of thing. If you keep doing everything wrong, I'm going to tell you you're doing everything wrong. Yeah. And the last straw was when she reversed into a pole in my van. So it's just like, no more.
Oh,
Yeah. Not very
dear.
good. But yeah, a few agency workers I've had to just ring up and say, no, don't send them back ever again. And like it's the little things that really get to you. Like they might seem really minor. It's like, what are you getting so upset about that? But if you put my lunch on the wrong shelf in the fridge, I can't reach it the next day.
Right.
You cut my tomatoes the wrong way, the harder for me to feed myself. It's all the little things that add up that drive you absolutely insane. And that's why, or people who don't listen, it'd be like, I told you to do this, this, and this, but you've done X, Y, and Z instead of A, B, C. And it's just like, yeah, really frustrating. It's like, I'm telling you how to do things for a reason. There's a reason behind everything I ask you to do.
Yep. This is why I text those things, so they can go back to the text message and they can see what I said. If they're not willing to do that, and then there can be, they can't claim that they forgot or misunderstood. The misunderstandings and the problems that can come from those. So I'm like, screw it, I'm texting everything. And
even in the house?
Yep.
Well, that would take me too long. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think communication is the best thing. If someone doesn't know the lefts and rights, then I can kind of work for that. But yeah, if you're just not going to listen or you're just going to ignore everything I say, then you're probably not the best fit.
Because I see it like if they think something that they do is so easy for them, but we got to think twice about how we're going to do it, and they don't see that. A lot of them, the really good ones, yeah, they're great. Yeah. Look, I've asked people like, I do this. I said, I'm walking on crutches. How do I pick up that chair, for instance, and carry it over there? I can't. And I shouldn't ask someone to do that. I say, well, they shouldn't think. They've got to think, some of them. Some of them don't,
We could have a whole webinar on.
I know we can, yeah.
I
The
think
good
that's
and
why.
bad.
Yeah, we could. And I think that's why I decided to write a list of benefits, because the things that we have learned from our lives are things that mean a lot, regardless of who you are. And it's exactly, I listed that off in the benefits, Robert, what you were saying. We're not so narrow, stuck in our own little world. We see the bigger picture, we see more things, and we see more about people. We're not afraid of differences in people. These are massive benefits that many people haven't had things in their lives that have forced them to learn these precious, precious things. So, yeah.
And chances are I've been doing this way longer than they've even been alive. So you think I know how it's easy, it's done my way best. And when I hire private workers, I prefer people with no experience whatsoever, because I prefer to train them my way.
Yes.
They've been a nurse for 30 years. They know everything, and be like, no, you don't know me. You don't know how I like things. I prefer someone with no experience, and they're a sponge. They just soak everything up and want to know everything. And they're so easy to teach.
So true. And also service providers can be just as bad in that department as well. I've come across OTs, not me personally, but people I know, an OT who decided she knew what was best for her clients, and she used their NDIS money, thousands of dollars, on things that they cannot use. She did it to all of her clients. She's now barred because of what my friend did, but she shouldn't be working in that job if that's her attitude. And she's not the only one. I've come across plenty of service providers that cause a lot of trouble. So, yeah. All right, we have
Anonymous attendee.
Is asking,
we
when you're
have
feeling low and lonely, how do you reach out? Well, that was very, very difficult for me at the time. And I thought, well, I got to move on. So I tried talking. The family were very understanding in that respect, mum and dad and all that. And then a couple of their friends introduced me, oh, why don't you find somewhere to talk about? I said, I didn't need counselling. I just needed people I can be around.
Yeah.
So someone suggested, that's when the men's shed topic came up, which I mentioned in my speech, that because it only started in my area around about the time I had my disability, but they kept pushing me to join, but I didn't join because I felt it was too hard for me I thought, well, will I be the only different one there, or would they accept me, because a lot of them were older than me at the time. And so I finally had to reach out. So I contacted, because there was no NDIS back then, so I only had help from my local council. And I reached out to, I think my worker I had from the council at the time, and they said that one of their social workers from the council was part of their thing, and they were going through a lot of things I could do. And they said, they mentioned a man's shed, and also around the corner from me, there was a community lunch held once a week. So they actually took me the first time I went. So I'll be with somebody, and they said, we'll come back and pick you up later and we'll see how you went and all that. So since that day, when I met all the people there, I started going on my own. So I just needed that push by somebody to get me going. And that's why, instead of being in my shell, so now I've learned that I can push myself, like, don't give up, just keep pushing at it, And as we mentioned earlier about, there's always that, so there's a lot of that lifeline and all that stuff wasn't much around when I had my disability. I didn't know about it. So all that's well publicised now. So all those services are out there for you. If you can't reach out to friends and family, try those services.
Yeah.
it's a confidence thing as well.
Yeah.
You know, if you had someone to go along with,
Yeah, that's what
and
the
then a few times,
the
and
initial
then-
push, the initial push.
yeah, and then you learn, oh, it's not so hard.
Yeah,
Not as hard as I thought it was going to be. Yeah.
It's a tricky one. All the people, like when you were talking, Robert, about being with people, you know, it doesn't matter what disability, it's great because there's no questions and there's no thoughts. Nobody gives a shit what your disability is. That's not what they're there for. You know what I mean?
but they don't see it. Like, I think one of them asked me once, "Oh, what happened to your leg?" I said, "Well, it got sick," and because I just did it in the simple way, it got sick, and
Yeah.
the doctor took it away. Even children asked me, "Well, what happened to your leg?" I said, "Oh, the doctor took it away because it was very sick." And someone goes, "Are you okay now?" And I said, "No, I'm fine. You know, I wasn't at the time, but I am now." So
See, this is the thing about the groups. Even though, you know, I know people are absolutely lovely, it's different when you're with people who get it. And so I tried the Mozart program. I think I just Googled and that's all that kind of came up, but it just wasn't fulfilling for me. The people were lovely, but I couldn't really, it wasn't fulfilling for me. There is a reason. So I stopped going there. That was government run. And I think everyone that I did meet their health was affected as well as having a disability, the same as me. So it's really hard because none of us really have the health to get together and do all the stuff that friends would do. And that can even be exhausting online. So it's just, that didn't work either. It's been it's taken many years, but I've learned a lot about myself in attempting. These days, I'm very fortunate to have my family live close by. So my friends are my family, and I know how blessed I am to have that, because I definitely can't find, you know, people elsewhere. I have considered what would I do if I didn't have my family. There are communities. So if you get onto your local council website, which is another thing that I did, and there are things that every council have. There are programs, and my council where I live have had a couple of firsts worldwide that councils around the world have taken on board. So again, I'm fortunate to have a council who are that engaged. And so, yeah, you can get onto your council website and just see what programs they may have. I know my council website has got a section for disabled people, and different things. So, and then you can also call them. I've called my council as well, spoken to the disability liaison officer, because you get a lot more information than just what's on their website. And again, another thing you mentioned, Robert, is not worrying about age. Being willing to just be with whoever is there.
I don't think the age doesn't not bother me, as long as we see each other as people, and that's it.
Yeah, because often it's going to be people that are way older, and you know, and just enjoying whoever is there. Yeah. So I don't know. What about you, Melanie?
Yeah, local libraries are great resources. They do lots of group stuff there. I think just find whatever you're interested in. It doesn't have to be disability related. If you've got a hobby, find a group doing the same thing. It could be a knitting group, could be a book club, it could be anything really. Just don't get too busy that you haven't got time for yourself. It can go both ways. You have to have that balance. Save your energy for what you need to do in the day as well.
Because as Melanie mentioned, I do also do 10-pin bowling once a week, and of course they adapted the sport because it's adaptive sport, so they're not all disabled. We got a couple of vision impaired ones in the group, and one just holds onto a rail, walks up to the lane, so he knows when the rail finishes, that's where he's got to let the ball go. And with me, I just sit on a stool and send the ball down that way, because it's an adaptive sport and it's one of many, but they're not all got different disabilities, or some don't have disabilities. One's just got arthritis or something. They've got a little handle on the ball, which they throw it down. They don't have to put their hands in it. So it doesn't matter with normal or disabled people, most sports are adaptive, even though individual sports. You can even play sport, and that gives you into a group situation.
There's always a way to make it work.
Yeah, everything works in the end. Yeah.
Hmm. And there's another question from Ella. How can we join the PDA community catch-ups that Robert mentioned? Ella, if you remember, you get it. You get an email to you beforehand. Natasha's great at sending out the reminders. You just have
That's
to
if you are
register
a
for each
PDA
one.
member, you get the group emails
Hmm.
and you get the links. Otherwise, if you're not a member of PDA, you can go to the website, www.pda.org.au/membership and sign up. And then you'll get the emails advertising social hours.
But you must have found out about this through your membership, Ella.
Yeah, so you must be already
I
a member.
assume anyway.
Yeah.
So there's probably an email in there somewhere. It's the first
Yeah.
Monday of the month.
Yeah, for the general one. I think it's the third Thursday of the month for the youth hangout. If I remember
Natasha will be
right.
able to tell us if we're wrong.
Yeah, she will.
Sounds
She'll put a
about right,
slide up
though.
maybe, but
Sometimes people find out about these from all of the groups that we post the link in.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
have you
Not
joined
every-
PDA social media pages? If you're on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, the PDA social hours go up on there too.
Any
well,
other questions?
we have one more that's just popped in. Oh, Ella said,
Ella,
thanks. I
yeah.
saw the event on social media, but I'll join PDA membership. Wonderful, Ella.
Yes.
Wonderful.
Welcome aboard.
Yeah.
Well, it's just after 7 now, or whatever time we've
5
just
in WA.
hours. What I'm
Yeah,
trying to
eight
say.
here in Melbourne, but
We've just gone an hour, is what I'm trying to say. So if there's yeah, it looks like there's no more questions.
well, no more questions.
I think one word of wisdom from me to finish off would be just find who you can confide in. You know, keep those special relationships with people who you don't mind sharing troubles and things like that. You know,
Yeah.
ignore the people who don't, you know, who annoy you and frustrate you. And keep those special relationships with people you're comfortable in talking to. Hand over to Robert.
Okay, thank you everyone for joining tonight's webinar. I hope it's been helpful for you, and thank you Melanie, Sarah, for sharing your stories and experience with us all. And thank you to Natasha, who always works behind the scenes, ensures these webinars are delivered to you. If you know someone or would like to watch this webinar again, it will soon be available on PDA's YouTube channel. And don't forget to fill out the survey after watching the link. The link will be in the description of the YouTube video. Your responses make it possible for PDA to deliver future webinars, or if you have any other ideas for future webinars, please let us know. If you enjoyed tonight's webinar and would like to see part 2, Intimate Relationships and Disabilities, to be presented tomorrow night at 7 p.m. AEDT, Australian Eastern Daylight Time, please visit the link www.pda.org.au/blog for further information. And if you're not a member of PDA, and you can sign up by going to www.pda.org.au/membership. Once again, good night, everybody.